The topic of our first meditation is how to study the Catholic religion. All of us have undergone some schoolings and we have studied several subjects. All of them can be considered as natural subjects because they're based on nature, they were made by man, they can be taught by man, and they can be learned by man. However, the Catholic Church is not a natural subject. It is a revealed religion. It is something that cannot be learned by man and taught by man. Precisely because it is a revealed religion, its knowledge can only be infused. It can only be taught by God. And so here we have on one side the natural subjects, and here on the other side we have the Catholic religion. The natural subjects are natural and therefore available to man, while the Catholic religion, being a supernatural religion revealed by God and taught by us from God's knowledge, infused knowledge, would be quite different. The defect in today's world is that we're trying to study the Catholic religion in the way natural religions are being studied. We are teaching it the way natural subjects are being taught. And this is the reason why today there is so much ignorance in the Catholic Church, because we do not know how to study the Catholic religion. If you will notice, if I wish to teach the Catholic religion, I'm not going to teach a set of truths. I would instead teach a person who said, I am the truth. I'm not going to teach a way of life like other ways of life, but I would teach a person who said, I am the life. And so in teaching the Catholic religion, we are supposed to get in contact with a person. And as I preach the Catholic religion, I'm supposed to introduce a person to you. You are supposed to meet Christ. Now, this is studying the Catholic religion. Because the Catholic Church is a supernatural topic or supernatural subject, the natural mind of man is unable to grasp it correctly. It is necessary that for man to be able to understand the truths of the Catholic Church, man has to be elevated into the supernatural level. And since naturally speaking, he cannot do this, he needs the help of grace, which only God can give in order to go up and elevate himself to the same level of these supernatural truths. Some months ago, Pope Benedict issued a letter entitled The New Evangelization. It is something strange that in the world today there is so much programs on evangelization, re-evangelizations, new evangelizations, but it seems that no evangelization is taking place. And Pope Benedict seems to have pinpointed the reason why it seems to be very unsuccessful, these projects of evangelization. He mentioned two important points in order to evangelize the people. He says that first, the method must be correct and the contents must be correct. The method and the contents. Today, As we had mentioned, people are studying the Catholic faith in the wrong way. We're studying it the way we would study ordinary human subjects. And so, when they study the Catholic faith in prayer meetings, in seminaries, theological school, catechetical schools, they're doing it the wrong way. As Pope Benedict says, the contents is wrong and the method is wrong. Early in the history of the Catholic Church, there was a prohibition in reading scriptures by a council in France. The reason behind this was the early fathers, the early bishops, the early Catholic Church knew very well that there was a danger in reading scriptures if you study the Catholic religion in the wrong way. In fact, there was a saying that when somebody grabs a copy of scriptures, there is always the danger that they would start a new religion or a new sect. And that precisely is what happened, that every time a Christian would get hold of a copy of scriptures, they would begin a new sect. Now, why would this happen? Because everybody is studying sacred scriptures the way we study human subjects. We keep on forgetting that it has to be learned in a very different way. And so, as we mentioned before, Pope Benedict emphasized the importance of teaching the Catholic religion, giving the right contents and the right method. If we would like to learn the right method and the contents of our instruction when we teach the Catholic religion, all we have to do is find out how Christ did it, or probably how the apostles did it, or at least how the fathers of the church did it. It is important, and Pope Benedict showed this, that first he gave us the catechism of the Catholic Church. Now, the Catholic Church and its catechism presents to us what are the teachings of the Catholic Church. But Pope Benedict knew it very well that if you read the catechism, you will not understand it fully, at least. So, whenever you read the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you will not understand it, but you are bound to believe it. So, the first act that we are supposed to perform when we read the Catechism of the Catholic Church is to believe it, even if we do not understand it. Then, afterwards, Pope Benedict issued his first encyclical, Deus Caritas Est, which is how to attain Christian charity. And then he tells us to put this into practice. After reading the catechism and believing it without understanding it, he wants us now to study what is charity and to put it into practice. When you put this into practice, if you try to work in order to reach charity, or if better, the perfection of charity, then and only then will you understand the Catechism of the Catholic Church. True, therefore, to the words of St. Thomas of Aquinas, that we believe that we might understand. So we believe the catechism, we put the encyclical on charity into practice, and it is in putting charity into practice or working to attain charity that we attain understanding of the catechism. Now we know very well that Christ have taught his apostles the entire teaching of the Catholic Church. And we also know very well that the apostles knew all the teachings of the Catholic Church, except most of them did not write it down, so we cannot appreciate the extent of their learning of the teachings of Christ. But we know very well that they knew all the teachings of Christ, and they knew it little. The apostles made the soul of the apostles fertile for the Word of God. So when Christ met them, saw them, and called them, they immediately followed Christ. The words of Scriptures are very clear that when Christ called Peter and Andrew, then James and John and so on, they left all things, their boats, their net, their fathers, and followed Christ. They had just left all things, and they followed Christ, and immediately they were given the infused knowledge about the Catholic religion. So suddenly they knew so much of the teachings of Christ. Of course, not completely all the teachings of Christ, but so much of the teachings of Christ that they began to see him as not just a prophet, but the Messiah. Now note that I said the knowledge was infused, that the apostles did not have books to read, they did not have much lectures from Christ. The knowledge was simply given to them, infused on them. This is called sometimes the first conversion. And this first conversion gives people, if you undergo it, it gives us so much knowledge, infused knowledge on the teachings of Christ. So it is clear in the story of the calling of the apostles that they had to leave all things before they can receive the big portion of the infused knowledge with regard to the teachings of Christ. They left all things and they received the necessary knowledge that they needed in order to know the teachings of Christ. This is the reason precisely why religious have to leave all things and make the vow of poverty. The reason religious leave all things and enter convents and so on is in order to deserve this infused knowledge, a knowledge that they need in order to seek God's kingdom, to seek holiness, and to save their souls. In monasticism, this is referred to as fuga mundo, or fleeing from the world. The reason why monks would leave the world and enter monasteries is for the same reason. They leave all things to know, in order to receive this infused knowledge which is necessary to attain holiness and their salvation. And so it is very clear, therefore, that theologians have called this the first conversion, where you have to leave all things to deserve this infused knowledge. Unfortunately, in the training of priests and seminarians these days, they do not do it. They do not leave all things, and therefore the infused knowledge never comes. They go to schools, they read books, they have examinations, they have lectures, but their knowledge is not infused. It is only man-made and therefore very shallow.
Joy is not in the things that surround us. It resides in the interior of the soul. One may possess it in the depths of a gloomy prison, as well as in a royal palace. Thus, a am I happier in Carmel, even in the midst of interior and exterior trials, than in the world where nothing was wanting to me.
After the first conversion of Saint Peter, you will know that he knew so much, except that he was ignorant yet of the necessity of sufferings. He could not see yet the necessity of suffering in the plan of salvation, why Christ had to suffer, why we have to suffer. And so when Christ mentioned to Peter that he had to go to Jerusalem in order to suffer, Saint Peter in fact tried to stop him, in which case Christ looked at him and called him Satan. Now, suffering is very important in the teachings of the Catholic Church. It is in fact essential to the teachings of the Catholic Church. One cannot be a good Catholic unless he knows suffering, he knows how to suffer and undergo sufferings. Now, this is something St. Peter did not know after the first conversion. He had to undergo the second conversion in order to receive the infused knowledge of the necessity of suffering in the teachings of the Catholic Church. This happened when Christ was arrested. It is now the Passion of Christ. He was now going to undergo his passion, and Peter just beforehand was bragging that he would not betray Christ ever, ever. And Christ prophesied that he would betray him. And so Peter was following Christ. He was arrested, and it was narrated that some of the women maidservant approached Peter and recognized him as a follower of Christ. And so Peter began to deny he was a follower of Christ 3 times. And Christ looked at Peter. Whenever Christ would look at somebody and love that person, he actually is giving that person sanctifying grace or charity, in which case that person begins to develop a deeper knowledge of himself, a deeper knowledge of Christ, and a deeper knowledge of what is love or charity. So Peter was a little self-righteous, believing in himself, self-confident, and it was time for him to have his second conversion. In the first conversion, Peter was considered a fish, but after the first conversion, he became fisher of men. Now, in the second conversion, Christ looked at Peter, and Peter suddenly realized a very important truth, which of course most of us do not realize. The fact that without Christ, he was completely useless. And so St. Peter began to realize that he needed Christ all the time and for all things, that there was nothing he could do without the help of Christ. And if Christ did not help him, he would do things wrong, as he was precisely doing. He was denying Christ because he depended on himself. But isn't that what we are all doing today? Pope Benedict says that everybody seems to have set God aside, very confident of being able to do everything that we want without God's help. It is a truth that most people do not realize, but which Peter realized. And so Peter repented, because he realized that depending upon himself was a great error. And having repented, Peter was restored to his former self, spiritual level. So picture it in this way, that Saint Peter was advancing in his knowledge and holiness, and then he betrays Christ, and therefore he goes down again in his spiritual life and his knowledge of Christ. But his repentance was so great, his realization was so great, that Christ restored him to his former level and even higher than he was before. Undergoing, therefore, his second conversion, Saint Peter realized the necessity of suffering, and all his behavior from thenceforward, after the second conversion up to Pentecost, will show that he was now willing to undergo suffering and to suffer even exactly like Christ by being crucified like Christ. After the second conversion of St. Peter, he realized the importance of suffering, the meaning of suffering, the reason why people suffer. So notice that the Catholic teaching of the importance of suffering is a very deep doctrine. In fact, today we are surrounded with so much suffering, calamities, catastrophes, and we don't know why God is sending this. We do not know the purpose of suffering, the benefit it accrues to mankind. In fact, with all the suffering that is going around, very few can explain what it is for and the great benefit it is supposed to redound to mankind. Why? Because we have not undergone our second conversion, and therefore we're ignorant of the meaning of suffering, the teaching of the Catholic Church on suffering. Then St. Peter is now ready for the third conversion. The third conversion took place at Pentecost, where suddenly he had the complete teachings of the Catholic Church. He knew what they were, he understood them, he had even wisdom. He had developed a deep understanding of all the teachings of the Catholic Church. But before Pentecost, before his third conversion, Christ called Peter and asked him 3 times. The first time Christ asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter, of course, said yes, and that was true, that Peter really loved Christ. And Christ told him to take care of the sheep, just to take care. It is easy to take care, easier to take care than to feed. Because when you feed, you have to feed the sheep with doctrine, deep, difficult doctrine that can only be infused. It cannot be learned, it cannot be taught. And then Christ again asked St. Peter a second time, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter answered, "Of course, Lord, I love you." And Christ again repeated the same thing, to take care of my sheep. To be able to take care of sheep of Christ, you don't have to have wisdom. Probably you may have knowledge, which is infused to, given to those who have undergone their first conversion. Maybe you can have understanding that is given, infused knowledge to those who have undergone their second conversion. And St. Peter had undergone the 2 conversions, and so he could taker of the sheep. And then Christ asked St. Peter a third time, Peter, do you love me? And Peter, with all humility, confessed again that he loved Christ. And the confirmation he gave Christ that he really truly loved Christ was Christ himself. He said, you are God, you know all things, you know that I love you. And Peter was now undergoing or approaching his third conversion. After the third conversion, God gives you the infused gift of wisdom. That means the entire knowledge of the teachings of Christ, complete. That is the gift of wisdom. And because St. Peter had wisdom, Christ says, feed my sheep. Only those who have wisdom can feed the sheep of Christ, because you have to feed them with charity. And only those with wisdom, not only those with knowledge and understanding, but those with wisdom can teach what is charity. And since Peter knew what charity meant, now he could feed the lambs of Christ. Saint Therese of Lisieux is evidently a saint who knew the complete teachings of the Catholic Church. Her life, the story of a soul, shows that she had a very good hold and understanding of all the teachings of the Catholic Church, and she was even able to integrate all these truths, very deep truths, into what you call her little way. Now, evidently, St. Therese never studied in a seminary. She never attended any theological school or attended any seminar on theology. In fact, she said that everything that she learned, she did not learn it from books. Of course, she had read a few books, but she said that everything that she wrote down, she did not learn it from books. But it is a fact that she is a doctor of the Church. And when the Church proclaims somebody as a doctor, it is because their concept and knowledge of the teachings of the Catholic Church is complete. It is not because they know only a little or have explained a little of the teaching of the Catholic Church. They're doctors because they have explained the entire teachings of the Catholic Church. This, therefore, in brief, is the way to study the Catholic religion. You cannot study it in the way you study ordinary subjects. It is infused. You just have to wait for it while working to deserve it.